Hello, grade 11. Welcome to another virtual lesson on creative nonfiction. This is Jasper Angeles, your virtual teacher for today. Before we begin, I would like to remind everyone that participation in the form of comments and jotting down notes is an important element to understanding the content we will uncover today. In the previous lesson, we have discussed the importance of shape in your creative nonfiction drafts. We said that shape pertains to the structure of the piece, write up, or draft. The drafts you have begun in the previous activities, however, cannot be taken as the final draft right away until they form a shape. What are the different shapes we have explored last meeting? Again, what are the different shapes that we discussed last meeting? Do you still remember them? Please write the shapes that you can still remember on the right or the comment box. Again, please write the shapes that you can still remember on the comment section, class. Okay, I hope that the same shapes that you can see on the screen right now are the things that you have likewise written on the comment section. We have the following as the shapes that our initial draft may take. We have chronological shape, segmented, framed, comparison contrast, episodic, multiple perspectives, Q&A, multi-genre, inverted pyramid, and deductive shapes. Now, before choosing a shape from the list, it is also important to determine the main message of the draft first. In the previous lesson, we likewise covered the practical guidelines to identify the real message we want to share with our readers using the draft. These guidelines will help you in the process of pointing out that message. From the message class, you begin looking at the most appropriate shape. Now, the initial draft may lack essential qualities or parts to accommodate the shape you have chosen. But to fill in some gaps and also improve the work or the quality of the work, we can include or strengthen the building blocks of creative nonfiction evident in the draft. These blocks are scenes, summaries, and reflections. If one of them gets to be used as the filler, the building block or that building block becomes a riff. Riff class allows the writers to add scenes, summaries, or reflections, and then return to the main story. You'll be able to see the full detail or also the scope of the riffs in the previous learning video. Right now, we want to move on from shapes and begin with the next topic. To properly unveil the topic for today, let's have a short activity. This is called Look and Listen. I have here lines coming from SpongeBob SquarePants. I do hope that everyone is still familiar with this next series. What I want you to do is to read and listen to the lines coming from this series and determine which character in SpongeBob SquarePants said those lines. Alright, the instructions is easy. You're just going to read and listen to the lines coming from the series and determine which character in SpongeBob or from the series said those lines. I hope that you are ready. Let's begin with the first set of lines. Let me read this for you. Today I want you to take inventory on everything in here. Every last pickle and patty must be accounted for. Counting me money, money sweeter than honey. Money, money this, money, money that. Profit will make me wallet fat. Alright, so which character in SpongeBob could have said these lines, class? Alright, look at the lines again. Who do you think? Who's this character? You have 20 seconds to write your answer on the comment section. Go. All right. What are your answers? If your answer is Mr. Eugene Krabs, then you're right. How did you know that it was him? Right. The words inventory, money, and profit make us realize that this character is indeed a businessman. Aside from this, I believe that Mr. Krabs is one of the few characters who displays his obvious love for money. Now, if you fail to guess Mr. Krabs here, let's try another one. Alright, so please guess the character who might have said the following lines. I'm ready, I'm ready, I'm ready. F is for friends who do stuff together. U is for you and me. N is for anywhere and anytime at all down here in the deep blue sea. Which character in SpongeBob could have said these lines, class? You have 20 seconds again to write your answer on the comment box. Go. What are your answers? The radiating positivity on these lines would make us think that this is definitely SpongeBob SquarePants himself. How did we know that it was him? I believe that you have thought of the characteristics of characters, right? Only a character as determined as SpongeBob would exclaim, I'm ready 3 times or more. This was how he conducts himself as a service crew in Krusty Krab every day. When orders start piling up and job feels overwhelming, SpongeBob perseveres and even saves the day. SpongeBob believes in himself, and it shows every time we see him wake up loud and proud each morning. Furthermore, SpongeBob considers just about everyone in Bikini Bottom as his friend. Is so adamant and very particular about friendship that he devotes an entire song to help people remember. These characteristics, class, are never the ones evident in, let's say, Patrick, who's so innocent and childlike, or Mr. Krabs, who is only after money he gets from a day's work. Now, so much for SpongeBob. Let's see the lines from the last character for you to guess. Okay, so the character, or this character, is famous for the following lines. I hate all of you. Well, it wouldn't be the first time you ruined everything. And wake me up when I care. Who is this character, class? Let me give you 20 seconds to think. Timer starts now. Alright, who do you think is this character? Now, it's if SpongeBob exudes positivity all the time, one of his neighbors counters this positive outlook with skepticism. And if we talk about being cynical about life, I do believe that you would never go wrong by thing because this is actually Squidward. How did you know that it was him? Just like how we guessed Mr. Krabs and SpongeBob, we looked at the contents of the lines and began thinking about which character in this cartoon series would possibly be related with a negative outlook in life. Squidward is someone who is always annoyed by things and that he finds himself or he finds about these things annoying that are irrelevant with his life in the same way that you sometimes feel annoyed by people around you. Squidward does not have the patience for nonsense. He's quick to let others know when he doesn't find worth in what they are saying, regularly shutting them out. This is who Squidward is, and I believe that you felt this characteristic in the following lines that you can see right now. It is no doubt that the makers of SpongeBob really worked hard to distinguish one character from another. Appearances and actions were not the only ones imprinted by the makers in each of these three characters, however. They are also imprinted with what we call a voice. You know that the lines were from SpongeBob because no one in Bikini Bottom would say such words that exude positivity and extreme amiability. You know that these words or the lines were from Mr. Krabs because the lines are all about money. And you know that the lines were spoken by Squidward because he's the only one in the series related with pessimism and skepticism. You know which is which because the lines present a certain voice. Now, voice is not only important in fiction class, this is also essential in improving your drafts in creative nonfiction. If the voice you exude, if the voice you exude in a paragraph does not relate much to the character you are portraying, the readers would find your work not only confusing but also inauthentic, something we avoid in creative nonfiction. Now, here is the formal definition. Voice class is the attitude of the writer as the I in the piece. Always remember that your draft here in CNF has a touch of your personality because the narrator is you. You're telling something about your life and transforming each event in a creative way. Part of being creative is knowing that the lines you have written reflect your true attitude at that particular point in time. Now, what do we mean by attitude? Attitude class refers to the way of thinking or feeling about someone or something, typically one that is reflected in a person's behavior. This means that the voice you give to yourself, again, this means that the voice you give to yourself or to the other characters in your draft must resemble how you or the real life counterpart of those characters think, express feelings, and or behaves. Let us say that in one of your memoirs, you are writing about you as a teenager. The dialogues, lines, and words written to develop the you as the character in that situation must consider the fact that you are a teenager in that part. You cannot write too many reflections and insights in life in addition to words that would suggest deep wisdom and adult experiences simply because you are presenting yourself as a teenager. The key here is to write the lines in your work and make them consistent with the kind of character you must have shown during the real event you are narrating. Since this voice class of the writer, all right, again, since this voice is the attitude of the writer as the one writing the piece, this voice must be genuine and trustworthy. Being genuine means being true to yourself when presenting yourself in the story. Later in the discussion, you would understand more what we mean by being genuine or honest. But I do believe that being genuine is done by always presenting yourself or other characters as consistent with the you've been before or with the kind of people these other characters had been in your life. Remember that in creative nonfiction, the who does matter. Voice counts as much as information because it's the world through one's writer or through one writer's eyes that engages us. Class, note that the voice is primarily about you as the one writing the piece about you. This is the reason why we said here that voice counts because it's the world through the writer's eyes. The voice presents how you view the world. The other characters in your write-up, being true to life, also need to be given appropriate voice. Now, given that we're saying, or given that we're saying this, the voice must be appropriate with the I or the characteristics of this I, otherwise known as the writer of the draft. I would like you to choose which of the reflections written by a doctor here retiring from medicine is the one appropriate from a doctor retiring from medicine. Again, I'd like you here to evaluate like a particular voice, no? I'd like you to choose which of the two reflections I'm going to show you. Choose which of the two reflections I'm going to show you, okay, is the appropriate reflection of a doctor retiring from medicine. Which of the two reflections is more personal and true for someone who writes about retirement as a doctor? Let us read the first one. Being a doctor is a noble profession, a beacon of light for the ill. I've felt the power of that light for over 50 years in the dark, gloomy nights of weather, full of torrential rain and snow, and in the eerie silence before the sun rises. Many tough times I've had, but so gratifying. The memories will continue to fill me with fondness and awe and will fuel the pages of my writing about this life commitment. Is this reflection more personal and true for someone who writes about retirement as a doctor? Yes or no? All right. Is it more personal and true, okay, for someone who is going to retire? Is it a yes or a no? All right. Let's see your answers later. For now, I want you to listen and read also to another paragraph about retirement as a doctor. Here's the second paragraph, or here's the second rendition. It is 12 years since I walked away from my beloved workbench in the operating room. It was not done with a cheery wave of the hand. For a long time, there was a sense of dislocation, as if I was standing on the bank of a stream, and it was the bank that was flowing while the stream stood still. Surgery was my native land. The writer who cuts himself off from his native land does not or does so at great risk. The subject of so much of my writing had been my work as a doctor. Would I be punished for sending myself into exile? Have nothing left to say? I needn't have worried. There is always the sharp and aching tooth of memory. Now, which of the two is more personal and genuine? The first one or the second one? Come on, write your answers on the comment box. Which of the two is more personal and genuine? The first one or the second one? If your answer is point number two or reflection number two, then I believe you're right. Now, why is this the case? Remember that we're talking about a doctor who is retiring from the field of medicine. Though most retirees would brag about what they have done or how much they sacrificed for something, someone who has learned a lot in his many years serving must have remained humble and considerate last. Retirees do not impress nor suggest self-congratulation. The first one tends to be predictable by saying that tough times had been so gratifying or that memories will continue to amaze him or her. This would be the common way others would tell everyone their thoughts on their experiences in the past. Since it is common, readers would find this uninteresting because they can see that the text would be just like another common grandfather bragging about himself, even though we're quite sure that in the course of a person's lifetime, there would always be, or there would always, there would always be regrets, longings, and shortcomings as what was revealed by the second reflection. The second one class, the voice in the second reflection tells us that being a retiree does not feel comfortable at all. He or she says that it was like or it's like you're being dislocated. He compares the feeling with standing beside a riverbank, only that the bank was the one flowing or the side is the one flowing and not the river, suggesting that he or she gets older and older for the profession he or she tried to cling on. This is so similar to retirees who still wanted to do what they have used to do. They wanted to continue to work, but the law states that they have to stop. Even at this point, even at the point of supposed accumulation of wisdom, life for the retiree or for the elderly still leaves them a set of unanswered questions, in the same way that we, the young ones, still have a lot to ask about ourselves. Now, these things we have said about the retiree in the second reflection makes him or her genuine and interesting. Genuine because he or she tells us that retiring does not always mean self actualization. It may also mean the feeling of dislocation, if not disorientation, due to the fact that he or she would never be able to do, would never be able to do what he or she used to do. And interesting because he or she gives us an impression that even at this age, he or she still needs to go on a journey to find answers to his or her unanswered questions. The idea here is simple. The voice of your work should not tell the readers things they would be able to predict and things that do not really define who you are. The voice must be someone willing to be vulnerable or open to the scrutiny of the public eye. Someone who is not afraid to tell everyone the reality of himself or herself. Now, to summarize everything we have explained as to why we choose the second, yes, why we choose the second reflection over the other, let me share with you some guidelines in sharing or developing the voice of your draft or work. Number one, individualize your voice by drawing on experiences that only you have. Remember that the more general your statements, the more they could be written by anyone. Again, the more general your statements, the more they could be written by anyone. For example, in the first reflection, the retiree says, being a doctor is a noble profession. Let me ask you, do you not know that being a doctor is a noble profession? Everyone knows and everyone will tell you that it is indeed noble. Nobody can dispute how heroic they are in the world. This is a good way to describe this profession, or this is a good way, yes, to describe the profession, but not a very good one individualizing or in individualizing or personalizing the voice. The goal here again, class, is not to present your character as something common, but as something that is unique to you. Since everyone knows the fact that being a doctor is being in a noble profession, anyone may write about being a doctor this way. This also leaves your work as common as others' work. Now the question is, how will I make the voice personalized? How will I create a voice that is only me? The more specific you are, class, the more distinctive your voice becomes. Being specific with what you do leaves others unable to copy who you are. In this example, not every doctor will say something about the beloved workbench in the operating room. Sure, there are workbenches in the operating room of other doctors, but not everyone will notice this as how the voice in the second reflection noticed it. Again, individualize your voice by being specific with your experiences. Right? Be specific with the ones that only you have experienced and cannot be copied by other people. Next, stay away from the predictable. Avoid platitudes or overused lines like memories will continue to fill me with the fondness and awe, or that life goes on, or I will treasure all the things in my life. Class, everyone can say these to impress someone. Again, everyone can say these. These things are copyable. Remember that your goal is not to impress, but to present yourself as who you are. Instead of using the overused lines, why not find fresh language that surprises the readers? Not everyone can describe a memory as a sharp and aching tooth, or say that the best memory is sometimes the one you do not want to remember anymore. Like, if you're going to write about the happiest and also the loneliest memory you have, labeling this memory as only the happiest would leave that memory predictable. Third, use a convincing voice that sounds natural. Instead of saying this line, in the dark, gloomy nights of weather full of torrential rains and snow, which is not really the natural way that a person will describe whatever that he's experiencing, all right? Instead of saying this line, which seems to be pretentious, old fashioned, wordy, and unnatural in terms with how we communicate with people around us, why not say, in those nights, all right, rain and snow had been my constant companions. Plus, the key here is always to put the voice with not only the appropriate language, but also the natural one, the one that a normal person would use. All right, so do not write write your work in such a way that it would not be something naturally done. Next, show a mind trying to figure things out. Class, it's important. Again, it's important that the voice you project is a voice that has not figured everything out, right? The voice must be something or must be someone who is not perfect. A voice that gives an impression that you still have unanswered questions. A compelling voice is one trying to figure out complexity like the one shown by the retiree in the second reflection. Yes, he has been a doctor for several years, but after all of that, there still remains questions that he or she must answer. Let's say I asked you to write a memoir about what happened to you during summer vacation. Everyone will expect that it's going to be fun, or if you're the only one, or if you're only at home without money, it's going to be boring, sullen, or maybe depressing. These are the expectations. Now, to not be predictable, you can present your voice as someone whom, despite all the fun and adventure, still struggles to find the true meaning of happiness. Or maybe if your voice is the sullen and depressing one, present the voice as someone whom, despite all the challenges in life, asks what makes life really depressing. The big idea here is not to always present your memoir as a complete set of who you are. Make yourself interesting by showing that even with the things you know or you have, you are still struggling to find clarifications or answers to life's difficult questions. Lastly, don't present yourself as a hero. Just like what I've said a while ago, readers like to see the struggles and vulnerabilities of the I, the struggles and vulnerabilities of the you as the writer of a memoir or the personal essay. A bragging voice or someone who tells he or she knows this and that or feels good about himself or herself in the course of the work turns people and readers off. If you want to be a hero in your work, at least follow the voice in the song Superman by Five for Fighting. Right? It says, it may sound absurd, but don't be naive. Even heroes have the right to bleed. It may be, or I may be disturbed, but won't you concede even heroes have the right to dream? All right. I guess that at this point of the discussion, you have already known what voice is and the ways to develop or search for the voice. To just know if you're really still in the discussion, let me ask you about the guidelines we have discussed that will ultimately lead you to finding the right voice for your memoir or a work of creative nonfiction. All right? How will you be able to find the right voice for your memoir? All right, so kindly write here the answers based on the ones that we have already discussed in terms of the practical guidelines to find the voice. Again, how will you be able to find the right voice for your memoir? You have 30 seconds to write your answer on the comment section. Go. All right. If your answers are similar to the ones on the list, right? Again, if your answers are similar to the ones on the list, I believe that you are on the track in this lesson on voice. These guidelines will surely lead you to a voice that is appropriate to the memory you will write soon. There are a variety of voice you can use. If the memoir is all about your childhood, use a childlike voice. If the memoir is all about your teenage years, then use a teen voice. From the many voices you could use, find the one that works best to tell a particular story. And I believe that you can use either of these two general kinds of voice, the voice of innocence and the voice of experience. To give you an idea as to what these voices are, class, let me ask you once again to evaluate the voice in these two versions of memoirs of Mimi in the article My Always or My Father Always Said. These memoirs are about a trip to her father's German village when she was 13. Which of the two memoirs, class, is the voice of innocence or the voice of experience? Is it the first one or the second one? Let's begin reading the first one. I'm being dragged through Europe by a father who's intent on convincing me that Forest Hills, Queens is not the world. He hates that his Yankee born daughter, me, wants to be exactly like my best friend Arlene, whose mother has bleached blonde hair and serves Campbell soup for dinner. In Reinheim, you didn't do such things, he'll say 100 times a day, especially when I want to hang out at Penn Jog on Friday night after the basketball games, or when I want to go to a party where he doesn't know the family. What do you think? Is this the voice of innocence or the voice of experience? Write your answers on the comment box, class. While you're thinking about that, let's have the second one. This is still Mimi, but in another voice. Let's see the second rendition. For years, I heard the same line. In Reinheim, you didn't do such things. It was repeated whenever the American world, his daughters took my father by surprise. Sometimes it came out softly in amusement, as when I was a pilgrim turkey. I was a pilgrim turkey in the PS3 Thanksgiving play. But usually it was a red faced, high blood pressure shout, especially when my sister Ruth became Pinto from Brooklyn, or I wanted to go with friends whose families he didn't know. Now, again, which of the two memoirs is the voice of innocence or the voice of experience? All right, is it the first one? All right, kindly label your answer. Voice of innocence. Is it one or two? Voice of experience. Is it one or two? You're correct if you have labeled this version, the second version, or the first version rather. You're correct if you label this first version of the memoir as the one exuding the voice of innocence. How did we know? Class, from the word innocence, we would know that we're talking about the voice that resembles that of a child. How do we know if this is a child? Well, I believe that you all will agree with me when I say that the child is typically whiny, someone who complains about things which he or she does not understand yet. You've been a child before, so I believe that you know. A child is very self centered. These characteristics are very well seen in the words dragged, me with exclamatory point, and the intentional placement of quotation marks on doesn't know the family. It seems that her father is a strict one, someone who does not want her to be affiliated with people his father doesn't know personally. By now, we would understand why the father is doing this because we're wiser now. But for Mimi, we're still a child here in this version of the memoir, she would never understand. This is because the voice is the voice of innocence. If the intention of the writer is to present how she was during her childhood years, this could be the best way to present that real life, even in her life. Now, Mimi gives us another version of this memoir. In here, we would assume that she uses the voice of experience because words that suggest force on her end and other emotionally driven words were not evident anymore. The last line was the same, but with quotation marks or not with quotation marks to suggest her disgust for her father. The way she described here, father, or her father here as one who would give a red-faced, high blood pressure shout is an objective and not a childish way of describing her father. Mimi's rhetoric class or way of narrating that real life event in this point of view or from the point of view of maybe someone who has understood why her father is like that. This is the reason why it is safe to assume that this version exudes rather the voice of experience. Remember that we know that it's the voice of innocence if the voice responds to the moment. He or she feels everything and comments on everything, unlike the voice of experience who looks back and reflects on the past. Now, in creative nonfiction, these two voices may be used side by side. However, there will always be one that dominates the whole piece. In this snippet coming from Scott Russell Sanders, Under the Influence, we can see the combination, if not duet, between the voice of experience and the voice of innocence. This part you see right now is one that involves the voice of experience. Let us read this first. My father drank, or my father drank. He drank as a gut punch boxer gasps for breath, as a starving dog gobbles food, compulsively, secretly, in pain and trembling. I use the past tense not because he ever quit drinking, but because he quit living. That is how the story ends for my father, age 64, heart bursting, body cooling, forsaken on the linoleum of my brother's trailer. The story continues for my brother, my sister, my mother, and me, and will continue so long as memory holds. We know that this comes from the voice of experience because of the past tense of the verb. Aside from the lines, this is how the story ends for my father. He describes his father who never quit drinking with reflections as an adult. Now, on this next part, the voice shifts from the voice of experience to the voice of innocence. Let's read this. In the perennial presence of memory, I slip into the garage or barn to see my father tipping back the flat, green bottles of wine. What's up, buddy? He says, thick-tongued and edgy. Sky's up, I answer, playing along. And don't forget prices, he grumbles. Prices are always up. And taxes. All of a sudden, we were transported back in time in this form of a scene to amplify his relationship with his father. Here, the reflections of the writer were not observed. What we can see here is the conversation between them, with the writer just replying to what his father asks in a way any typical child would reply. Now, I've shown you this example to suggest that in your own memoir, you can shift voices to suffice your intention. Here, the writer's intention is to give the readers a glimpse of what he thinks about alcoholism and his relationship with his father, who has been under that influence for years. To do this, he needs to use the two kinds of voice. Now, let's say that you have found the voice. The next question is, where will you place it? Once you have found the right voice, where should you position the I or the narrator of the piece? Class, in creative nonfiction, the I or you as the narrator is placed within the work. If you draw a circular stage that represents one piece of writing and mark where the I stands, it could be in the center, telling personal stories like the doctor's. It could be or it could also share the spotlight with others. It could be near the edge, playing a small role as guide or MC, or it could be off stage, someone who observes but is never seen, someone who is not seen but is always heard. From this table class, we know that voice can be placed on center stage, near the sidelines, sharing the stage with others, or off stage. Let us have an example here. This is an opening paragraph for the profile of the college president or a college president. Let's read. I have to admit, I've always been a little afraid of Alice Chandler. Part of my fear came from her title, President of the State University of New York and New Paltz. I've always found it hard not to be intimidated by the president of anything. Where do you think is the I here? Right, of course, obviously there is a voice. Now, where do you think is the voice? Where do you think is the I? On center stage, near the sidelines, sharing the center with others, or center stage with others, or off stage? Come on, write your answers in the comment box. Where is the I here? Center stage, near the sidelines, sharing the center stage with others, or off stage? All right. The I is, of course, as we can think, is on the center stage. Okay, why? It is because in this opening paragraph, what we have seen are all the thoughts of the voice about Alice Chandler. The content is about Alice, but the whole introduction tells and thinks about her than Alice herself. Now, this positioning of the I is okay if the intention is to focus on the thoughts of the writer or the voice about Alice. This positioning becomes inappropriate if the intention is to focus the paragraph on Alice. If Alice is the focus, then the voice should have seen more on the sidelines or maybe off stage. Let's see another example. This comes from a travel essay entitled Moments of Being an Antarctic Quintet by Gretchen Legler. Let's read. At the peak of the Antarctic summer season, it's light 24 hours a day. The light is bright, sterile, technical like the light in the hospital operating room. It was a shock to be out with friends, leaving McMurdo's coffee house near midnight and have to blink into the brightness, shading my eyes with my hand. Where do you think is the I here? On the center stage, near the sidelines, sharing the center stage with others, or off stage? Come on, write your answer on the comment box, class. Where is the I? Okay, I believe that you would agree with me when I say that the voice is near the sidelines. Look at the first two sentences. The I is more focused on the scenery than his or her own thoughts. Even in the third sentence, you will see that the I is more of someone who describes the moment than describe what he or she, or let's just say she, what she feels about the moment. This is very appropriate, of course, in a travel essay because the focus must be on the destination, not on the people describing it. Okay, how about this one? Where is the I here? She was 34. She wore a white skirt and yellow sweater and a thin gold necklace, which she held in her fingers as if holding her own reins while waiting for children to answer. Her hair was black with a hint of Irish red. Okay. On center stage, near the sidelines, sharing the center stage with others, or off stage? Where is the I? Come on, write your answers on the comment section, class. Where is the I? If your answer is off stage, you're correct. Here you will see that it is as if the I is not around. He is just observing, or the I is just observing and telling us what he or she sees. He or she does not involve herself or himself in the moments he or she observes. Nevertheless, this is still an effective way to present literary journalism because in this subgenre, we avoid being biased toward the subject of the investigation. This could be done by observing the event intently, thereby placing the I off stage and giving the character the center stage. I hope that besides knowing what voice is, class, its importance two kinds, right? Importance in two kinds. You would also remember this concept on the placement of the I or the voice in the draft you will write. Now, aside from the combinations of innocence and experience from the I or the writer of the piece, You can also use outside voice. This outside voice refers to the voice of the characters in your draft. This could be made evident by first adding a dialogue. Through conversations, the readers would know the voice or the attitude of the other characters in the draft. This is necessary to further foreground, if not emphasize, your voice as the I. An example of this, or an example, would be this conversation from the piece we have read a while ago. To tell the readers how it is like to have a father with drinking problems, the writer included not only his voice, but also the voice of his father. Now, you might be asking, what if we don't remember anymore the conversations we've had with a certain person whose voice we want to include in our drafts? Again, what would happen if you don't anymore remember those conversations? Remember that what we write in creative nonfiction are true, so the conversations must also be true. But what will you do if you don't seem to remember the lines verbatim or the real lines coming from the people, okay, you've talked with before? Class, remember that the aim of adding dialogue is to capture the spirit of relationship, the essence of what transpired, or the felt truth of what was said and heard. It's not really important to capture the words as they had been said before. Again, it's not really important to capture the words as they had been said before. If you remember the words, that would be okay. But if you don't remember, that's fine as well. The important thing here is that through the creation of the conversation, you were able to capture the relationship you had with that particular person. So basically, you are creating the whole conversation again based on the spirit of relationship with a person. Let's say you want to include a dialogue with your best friend. The words you will use in the dialogue may or may not be the real things that you have really said. But through these words, the readers must feel that you and that person are really close friends. I think that you know that there are words that you and your best friend will use, right? And will not use with other people. All right. So with those kinds of strategies, you'd be able to tell or make the readers feel that you're really a best friend to that particular person, or you are having a certain sort of a relationship with a particular person. You can further put on stylistic effect on these dialogues by placing the quotation mark for the character on the right place. Looking at these lines here, you would see that the meaning seems to change with the placement of the quotation marks. You can emphasize music being the food of love by placing the quotation marks before play on. You can also place the quotation marks after music to emphasize music. The condition can also be amplified if you are to place the quotation marks beside if. You can decide where to place them depending on your intention. Class outside voice can also come in the form of opposing points of views for credibility. Not to be labeled as one-sided in the draft you're writing, you can add your opposing or others' opposing point of view. In this example, you will see that the writer did not only include his thoughts on the negative effects of alcoholism, he likewise presented a dialogue with his father when he was still a child for others to see that his father, even under the influence, did not exhibit violence as others think. This OPV neutralizes the issue presented in the text. Now, given that we're writing about real life events and that we have no capacity to really capture dialogues and conversations, are we sure that the voice in our drafts is really authentic or real? Is the voice of our draft really authentic? Class. A genuine voice is always influenced by class, culture, race, and gender. We cannot really guarantee that all of these will manifest in the voice we will construct in creative nonfiction. However, it's important to note that though this authentic voice is constructed, it is not necessarily false. There is, of course, truth to it according to how we remember the spirit of relationship and the felt truth from the real life event we would like to include in the draft. Authenticity for creative nonfiction writers means finding the language to convey the real life experiences in the way or ways they were experienced in life. The voice may not wholly be authentic, right? May not be wholly authentic or entirely authentic, but at least it covered much of what is authentic. Now, before we end, let's have a short review and application. I have here this paragraph from Beauty when the other dancer is the Self by Alice Walker. If you have watched the previous lesson, you would be acquainted with this piece. For the first question, which voice is evident here in the text? Right? As you can see on the text, which voice is evident? The voice of innocence or the voice of experience? I will give you 20 seconds to write your answer on the comment box. All right, so again, your task here is to identify, right, which particular voice is exuded here, the voice of innocence or the voice of experience. Okay, you have 20 seconds. Timer starts now. Okay, so what is your answer? Remember that this is a form of a summary or an event that happened in the past. The I, without reflections on what Miss May did, tells us what she remembers. So if your answer is voice of innocence, you're correct. This voice is very appropriate here because the intention is for the readers to infer on how Miss May looks at their family. Using the voice of experience here would rather not force the readers to think, but only to rely on what the I thinks. Okay. All right. So next question. Where is the I in this paragraph? Okay, I'm referring to the same paragraph that you have read. Okay, so we have already said that the voice is the voice of innocence. But where is the I in the paragraph? Where is it placed? You have 20 seconds to answer. Timer starts now. All right, what is your answer? Okay, is it on center stage, near the sidelines, sharing the center stage with others, or off stage? Since she is describing what she remembers by placing the she, who is Miss May, with her in the paragraph, one will say that the I is indeed sharing the center stage with others. Now, given all the things we have talked about today about voice, do not forget that it is the attitude of the writer as the I in the piece. Okay, so don't forget the big idea in the discussion about voice, that it is the attitude of the writer. Right, there might be many other details that we have discussed, but make sure that you remember that this is what voice tells us and how this is important in the creation of your succeeding works in creative nonfiction. In the memoirs, personal essays, travel essays, and other forms of creative nonfiction you will write soon, I hope and pray that you will find not only the right voice, or that I pray that you will not only find the right voice. I'm expecting that you will also know where to place them and how to further make them shine in your work. This is again Sir Jasper Angeles, your virtual teacher in creative nonfiction. See you next time.